Chapter 1. The Cages of Eridu. The air in the breeding facility was thick with the scent of sweat, antiseptic, and despair. Lyria, 7, like all human specimens on Eridu, had a number instead of a name. She was property, a genetic asset owned by the Zorathian Dominion, bred for one purpose: to produce strong offspring for the Empire's labor camps. She lay on the cold metal slab of her cell, staring at the ceiling, where flickering holographic displays projected her genetic compatibility ratings. High fertility, strong bone density, resilient immune system. To the Zorathians, she was nothing more than a collection of desirable traits. The door hissed open, and Overseer Vrail loomed in the doorway, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh artificial light. "Lyria 7, he rasped, his voice like grinding stone. "You have been selected for breeding. Report to Chamber Gamma at the next cycle." Lyria clenched her fists but said nothing. Resistance was punished with electroprods or starvation. She had seen others try and fail. As the door sealed shut, she rolled onto her side, pressing her hand against the hidden groove beneath her sleeping slab. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of the stolen data chip she had scavenged months ago from a careless technician. It was her only hope. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Knowledge. That night, when the facility's dim lighting shifted to nocturnal mode, Lyria activated the chip. The holographic display flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow across her face. It contained classified Dominion files, schematic maps, security protocols, and most importantly, records of past escape attempts. One file stood out. Subject Delta 12, terminated during breach. Lyria studied the footage. Delta 12 had nearly made it to the outer gates before the automated turrets cut her down. But she had done one thing right. She had disabled the surveillance in Sector 9. Plan began to form. The next day, during her assigned labor shift in the hydroponics bay, Lyria discreetly pocketed a vial of acidic nutrient solution. It wouldn't melt through reinforced doors, but it could short-circuit a control panel if applied correctly. She just needed an opportunity. Chapter 3. The Uprising. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During a routine inspection, a power surge caused a blackout in the eastern wing. Emergency lights flickered, and the guards scrambled to restore order. Lyria acted fast. She slipped away from her work detail and ducked into a maintenance tunnel, using the stolen acid to burn through the lock of a service hatch. The tunnels were narrow, damp, and crawling with bioscanners, but she had memorized the blind spots from Delta 12's failed attempt. Then came the first obstacle, a biometric checkpoint. Only Zorathian DNA could open it. Lyria hesitated, then pressed Overseer Vrail's severed finger against the scanner. She had taken it during the chaos, her stomach churning at the act. The door slid open. Ran. Chapter 4. The Outside World. The tunnels led to the underbelly of the facility, where waste was processed before being ejected into the planet's barren wastelands. Lyria climbed through a disposal chute, her hands slick with grime, and emerged under Eridu's twin moons. The air was freezing, the landscape a desolate expanse of jagged rock and toxic fog. But it was free. She didn't stop moving. The Dominion would send hunters. She needed to reach the ruins of the old human colonies, where rebels were rumored to hide. For 3 days she trekked, evading drones and scavenging for food. On the 4th day she found them, the Freeborn Resistance. A woman with scarred cheeks and a pulse rifle stepped forward. "You escaped the breeding pits." Lyria nodded, her voice raw. "And I'll help burn them down." Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The Resistance had been planning an assault on the Dominion for years. With Lyria's knowledge of the facility's layout, they finally had a chance. The attack came at dawn. Lyria led the strike team through the same tunnels she had used to escape. They planted explosives at key structural points, freed the imprisoned humans, and turned the Dominion's own turrets against them. When Overseer Vrail confronted her in the control room, she didn't hesitate. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," she said before pulling the trigger. The facility collapsed in flames behind them as they fled, the sky alight with the fire of rebellion. Epilogue. A name of her own. In the ruins of the old world, Lyria stood before the gathered survivors. No longer Lyria, 7. Just Lyria. The fight wasn't over. The Dominion still ruled the stars. But for the first time she had something they could never take from her. Future. And she would make sure every slave who came after her had one too. The fires of the fallen breeding facility still smoldered in the distance as Lyria stood atop the ruins of an ancient human watchtower. The wind carried the scent of ash and freedom. Below her, the survivors, former slaves, rebels, and those who had lost everything to the Dominion, gathered in silence. They looked to her now, not as a number, but as the spark that had ignited their rebellion. Kale, the scarred leader of the Freeborn Resistance, stepped forward, his pulse rifle slung across his back. "We've struck a blow today," he said, his voice rough but proud. "But the Zorathians won't let this go unanswered. They'll come for us. Harder than before." Lyria nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. She knew the Dominion's cruelty firsthand. They would not forgive. They would not forget. "Then we make sure they regret it," she said. The final battle. 3 cycles later, the Dominion's warships descended like black storms over the rebel stronghold. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their armored walkers, their plasma cannons glowing with deadly energy. The Freeborn were outnumbered, outgunned, but not broken. Lyria stood at the front lines, her stolen Dominion blade in hand. She had trained every freed slave who could hold a weapon. They had fortified the ruins, laid traps, and turned the wasteland itself into their ally. When the first wave of Zorathian shock troops charged, the rebels unleashed their fury. Explosions ripped through the enemy ranks. Pulse fire lit the battlefield. Lyria fought like a woman who had nothing left to lose, because she didn't. Every swing of her blade was for the ones who hadn't escaped the breeding pits. Every shot fired was for the future they deserved. And then she saw him. High Overseer Drakther, the architect of the breeding program, stood atop a command platform, his crimson exoskeleton gleaming. His voice boomed across the battlefield. "You are property. You will be reclaimed or erased." Lyria didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the chaos, dodging plasma fire, her heart pounding. Kale covered her, his rifle picking off Dominion soldiers as she closed the distance. When she reached the platform, Drakther sneered. "You think you've won. You are nothing but a failed experiment." She lunged. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. He was stronger, faster, but she was angry. With a final, desperate strike, she buried her blade in his chest. The High Overseer staggered, his black eyes widening in disbelief. "You cannot." "I already have," Lyria whispered. As his body crumpled, the Dominion forces faltered. Without their leader, their assault collapsed into chaos. The rebels pressed their advantage, driving the invaders back. The sky burned. The Dominion retreated. New dawn. In the aftermath, the survivors gathered once more. The cost had been high. Too many lost, too much blood spilled. But for the first time in generations they had won. Kale placed a hand on Lyria's shoulder. "You did it. You freed us." She shook her head. No. We freed each other. The rebels cheered, lifting their weapons in triumph. Some wept, others embraced. And then Kale did something unexpected. He knelt. One by one the others followed. Lyria's breath caught. What are you doing? Kale looked up, his gaze fierce. We follow you now. Not as a slave. Not as a number. As our leader. She wanted to refuse. She had never asked for this. But then she looked at their faces, the hope in their eyes, the defiance that had been buried for so long. Then we keep fighting, she said. Not just for survival. For our future. The last line. Years later, the legend of Lyria the Liberator spread across the stars. The Dominion still ruled, but their grip was weakening. Rebellions flared on a dozen worlds. And on a reclaimed planet, under a sky no longer patrolled by Zorathian warships, a monument stood. For those who refused to be broken. Lyria stood before it, her hand resting on the stone. She was no longer just a woman. She was a symbol. And the fight was far from over. But now they fought with hope.